Okay. Okay, everyone. Welcome to another coffee shop Wi-Fi episode. Today is December 31st, so Happy New Year to all those who are present. I wanted to speak about the potentials of the psyche. Just a second. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start from here and talking about the psyche, and then I'll get to how I am considering that 2023 will be a fascinating year. This is not just an inner intuitive command, but it is more a sense of like the human species went through certain phases of its inefficiency, and now the turn for the efficiency is coming. (2023) could be said to be the year where the cocoon of the old world human consciousness is opening and the era of the advanced humanity is beginning. Something we have not seen as a species on this rock is a global patriotism for our species, you know. We are patriotic when it comes to chunks of land where we are existing, but when it comes to how we're existing, we are forgetting the patriotism there, right? The most important thing about consciousness is the preservation of humanism. We are reaching a point in human history where culturalism is dehumanizing us, technology is dehumanizing us, the future generations are being forced to grow up so quickly that they will miss out on their childhood, and give it a time span of a couple hundred years, there will no longer be young children. There will be people born, but they will not have the minds of children. So, whoever you are, you know, I'm a person who I don't entertain the archetype, you know, the guru archetype. You know, there was a time I'm somebody who I would say I am self-taught, simply because I realize nobody else has my eyes, so who is left to figure out the mystery and the secret of why my attention is here? I don't know who you are who's listening. I don't know where you are. I don't even know what you identify as or what you are. Okay? But all I know is that anybody who's been listening to these Mr.Within lectures, if you have been listening for more than a couple years, the intent is for the species to advance communication. You know, when I was starting these talks, I envisioned, crowds of people, something in those lines. Now I don't know if that's the future will find me. That future will find me. I have a feeling it will, but but I have come to this realization that more important than how I feel about the ideas I have is what is more important is how efficiently the world is advancing. You see, I am wise enough to know and humble enough to know that this world is a massive collective event. It is not designed for one person to succeed. It is designed for the species to pass an evolutionary challenge. We are creatures that exist, and our existence is its own meaning. Okay, this is something which I agree with the existentialists, French philosophers. I don't know, what was it, like 1960s, 70s, something in those lines. We have people, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre, which he says the essence is the being. You see, man's mind had to ground and stabilize itself in dimensions where it could assume and consider them to be real. Okay? What has happened so far is that existence has given us the initial momentum. Any being that is existing, you have been positioned as a director of energy. Human intelligence has a very different role compared to other animal life. Other species, they are seeking the perfection of the harmony of their environment. The human species is beyond the harmony of its environment. There was a force that made us stand on our two legs. There was a force that made us step out of the jungle and step out of the food chain. Why? Because we saw a value that the brains of other creatures did not see. And there comes a responsibility of lifetimes into now. You who have manifested in the world that is being you. Have you ever wondered what your species wants from you? Because technically self-desire, like I'm a member of the species, if I want to be happy or if I want to just have fun, right, sure, I'll be like, okay, I'm listening to the species, one member of the species. But if I think about reality, if I think about what am I considering material when there is a mind in the room, what am I considering immaterial when there is a body in the room, what can man do with the dimensions that he or attention has access to? I want to read for the viewers something about the psyche. The psyche is a term used in psychology to refer to the human mind or soul. It is often used to describe the complex range of mental and emotional processes that are responsible for our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and experiences. The psyche is believed to be made up of various components, including the conscious mind, which is aware of our thoughts and experiences, the unconscious mind, which contains our deeper thoughts and emotions that are not necessarily accessible to our conscious awareness, and the ego, which is responsible for our sense of self and our ability to interact with the outside world. The psyche is also believed to be influenced by factors such as genetics, environment, culture, and past experiences. Understanding the psyche is an important aspect of psychology and is a key focus in many theories and approaches to mental health treatment. What does this mean? This means we're these intelligent beings. This intelligence, it's like this brain that is leading, that is expressing itself as a mind. This mind has divisions for itself. Some of this stuff about the conscious mind, unconscious mind, the ego, whether we have Freud's id, ego, superego, or Carl Jung's collective unconscious and whatnot. The idea is that our brain is like an iceberg. The ego is the top of the iceberg, which we can see and control. The conscious mind is in some sense the connecting point. It's like that part of the iceberg that is in the water, but is connecting the outside, the surface and the depths. Okay, so we can say the purpose of the ego is to be a sort of vehicle of shape for the intelligence of our attention to move in. The purpose of the conscious mind is to be able to decide, to notice the environment before deciding. What the conscious mind is a noticing technology. It's discriminating. It's choosing. I am an individual because I am choosing to be separate from the world. But if I choose to think of myself as the world, there was a time where, like, as a materialist, the argument of oneness is way superior than from an immaterialist perspective. Like, there's some people who are saying we're all one consciousness, one moment, broadcasting all moments. But there are others who are in some sense, wait a minute, it's an existential dimension. What that means is that I am made up of the periodic table, the world is made up of the periodic table. It's like the periodic table, is separating from itself for a while to then return. It's as if something non-physical has possessed the physical to realize it's non-physical. Okay, there is something else here. You could be a materialist, you could be an immaterialist, you could believe in any story. They could throw you any bone of a story and you'd be like, you'd bite it, bite the dogma, But I will tell you, the only thing left now is the expressions of the advanced humanity. We're going to see it. I'll share this with the viewers. I'm someone who, when I look at myself, I see a spectrum of, advantages, disadvantages, and I think about this world and I wonder, is my evaluation of it subjective or is it objective? What I've noticed about existence is that existence is a sort of singular technology. What does that mean? That means existence exists. Just like the color blue is the color blue, existence is existence. But what is changing existence from just being a singular existence is the nature of the mind, which is another way of saying the human species is dualistically and rhythmically experiencing its singular existence. Our minds give us the privilege to live another life overlaid upon the actual life. 2023 will be fascinating. Why? Because many human beings will wonder why their ancestors lived, why their ancestors survived to get them here. And we're going to realize it's to act upon collective wisdom. Right now I remember seeing this video online, I think it was from Dan Penna, where he said, like, in the next coming years, in the future, like a lot of billionaires are going to be made. Okay? And I thought about that as if there's a lot of billionaires made. Who is it? Somebody said, like, with $20 million you can do everything that the wealthy are doing. You could experience every sort of, let's say, advantage of wealth and abundance with $20 million. Now I'm thinking, imagine 8 billion human beings. They woke up one day, they opened their accounts, and they saw that every person had $20 million. And I am wondering, waiting to see how long can the species bask in luxury. Okay, because survival has translated to luxury in these modern times, right? If the standard of survival, if the standard of living was lower, then it would be easier to get everybody to that standard of living. But because there's a sort of hierarchy, right? Just like we have different buildings with different heights, we have different human beings with different efforts, So, where's all of this leading? I don't know, but when I look at this life, there's really two dimensions, with two events we can attend. Okay, either we can attend an existential event, or we can attend an experiential event. Usually, both of them are happening, but they happen in different degrees. I would use myself as an example to tell the viewers that I have lived around a decade with moving my mind, with living as a mind more than a body. Okay, and in doing so, I have realized that the future generations will have a sort of division. What it means is that there's going to be people who are more comfortable being a non-physical entity than being a physical entity. In the future, there may be opportunities through, let's say, the advent of cyberspace, where our inner experience of life will be way faster and efficient than our outer experience. This is what the information age has done, by the way. This is why in some of my talks I've said the internet came too soon. It's like giving a gun, or I should say giving a knife to a toddler to like cut fruit. Right, the toddler may like 10 out of 10 times, like let's say 9 out of 10 times use the knife to cut the fruit, but 1 out of those 10 times it's going to use the knife to hurt itself. Right. So this is something the species, I think, didn't imagine, that information can become dangerous simply because it can fill up areas of life that natural experience needs to fill up unnaturally. So if our minds, if in the future, I'll give you an example, right? So I'm someone who, if somebody asks me a short question, I'm someone who gives a very slow answer. But if you ask me, like I'm someone who my answers to questions are like paintings. I gotta paint the context and then give you the concept, right? I remember telling someone my sense of humor is like lightning. You hear the sound, but then it doesn't strike until the end. It's like, it sounds funny, but then like it's just oh man. I don't know. When I think about what can I do as an intelligence, I can existentially move and satisfy my non-physical mind physically. Or I can choose to satisfy my non-physical mind by shifting the context, right? Like some people may wonder, I don't know how to, here, it's difficult. What I'm trying to say is, because I'm talking about renunciation, but a renunciation that naturally happens when you experience yourself as a non-physical being. If you get just a single experience of something that is unknown in the moment, what happens is a restoration of faith in the unknown occurs. I will tell you that when I was younger, I thought knowledge is power. Then I realized knowledge is not power. Because what does knowledge look up to? The unknown. If somebody said, Mr. Within, who are the greatest beings that have ever lived? What's the greatest archetype on this planet? I will say the explorer. For me, the prophets of religions were explorers of psychological states. They were receivers of inner realm content. To me, they were incredibly advanced communicators, and I'm this maverick. I'm a bit of I go a bit. My perception is a bit intense. For me, prophets are all time travelers. Religion is a time traveling intervention. It's a primitive time traveling intervention. Imagine you're a time traveler, okay, and you want to go to the past and you want to change the behavior of the people in the past. So what you do is you tell him there is a common denominator which is not physical. So till the end, the people have to physically wonder about how non-physically they're united. The power of religion, you see, people don't realize we are in a world where there is the light and there is the shadows. And so what it means is that there is a Sith and Jedi to every archetype, you know? Every archetype has good and evil. The idea is, which do you tune into? Like, for example, when you speak to someone, do you tune into their shadow? Do you see their shadow first, or do you see the light of their real self first? For me, anytime I had an assumption on someone, I was tuned into their shadow. But anytime I kept the moment unknown and untouched, and I was like, all right, it's not just my brain moving the world is moving itself, and my brain is a part of this process. And the way the brain is interacting with the world, the mind could be said how a brain positions itself. Right? So we're this objective organism subjectively positioning itself and then wondering what is beyond the subjective limitations it's imposed on itself. 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. They opened their eyes, they began moving first, then their minds began moving. The movement of our minds translated into communication, into the development of language. The development of language, many people don't know this, that cultural behavior that we see in 2022, it was very fragmented, and it's literally what the process we're seeing in culture and society. It's like something that has happened to sociology, it happened in our psychology, and then amplified and echoed and fractalized in a sociological position. What does this mean? You see, I have wondered, why is it that if you see a baby deer, like Animal Planet level, right? You watch Animal Planet, you see this deer being born, and the deer is born knowing already how to run. But why is it that the human being has to be taught how to walk? It has to be taught how to speak. It has to be taught how to accept reality, how to accept and reject reality. Something that I will say this dead on, right? That in all religious countries and in theocratical states or religious cultures, one thing that the young children raised in religious society do not understand is the concept of personal boundaries. Because when you are raised in a religious society, you are not the boundary selector. God is the boundary selector. You see the difference between a human being being an actual human being and a human being a robot of the past generations. It's literally in the novelty you experience, right? Like with our ancestors, I have a feeling that if the prophets of religion, somehow all of them resurrected and they could see the religious communities today, they will all start crying. Why? Not because the religious communities have not accurately held the religious ideology, but because we are in this world to be a new creation of God. We're not here to repeat the past, yet the meaning of our society is based on the past. It's as if we're trying to be new people living in a world where its meaning is based on the past, and we're wondering where's the innovation. Like this is intense. Are we ignoring as a species the type of linguistic, the type of psychological cave our species is hidden in? Beyond language, there's states of mind where you instantly teleport. You don't need conveyance. You don't need the journey. The journey is for beings that have shape. When anytime you're a shaped entity, karmic cycles are the advantage. It comes with it. Just like some shoes you buy one, get one free. Similarly, you bought into an incarnation and you got the life of a world for free. Okay? Why I'm saying language and culture have similarities is because many people don't know this. Before, like right now, I'm speaking English, I'm bilingual. Before I would speak Farsi. When we look at, for example, let's say Asian languages, for example, Mandarin, what we see really is that before nationalism, people were speaking so many different languages. Like you'd have somebody in a village using words that the other person in another village didn't even know what they meant. And it was like body language and facial expression and gestures were like more of the communication, right? The human behaviorism, right? But when nationalism occurred, something fascinating occurred, and people had to opt into a singular language. Rather than all these different dialects, they had to forget their own past style of separation to, in some sense, find a collective common unity. So what happens is language becomes singularized for nations. This is very important, out of all the different dialects that were in the land of each nation. Okay. Now, when we think about language being a sort of singular thing, it's like we all are subjective members of a linguistic system, okay, of the language we've learned. Like we're members of it. If we understand the words, we understand the reality of those words. And the purpose of language and communication, anybody who's even reading a book, like you should be reading a book so fast that it's a film in your mind. And then human mind remembers films way easier. The biggest thing that changed my intelligence was that I stopped from remembering sentence structure. Like my imagination would see sentence structure, but then my imagination, it was as if the sentences were too slow. Imagine a mind moving so fast, the letters in the words that are seen in the inner realms don't have time to be letters. Do you understand? The mind, I don't want to say it, but it's doing what magic does. The mind is taking something that has no value and giving it an incredible value. And there is the value and the meaning and the purpose of life. It is how our eyes swim in manifestation. Whether it's a front stroke or a back stroke. Or I don't know, maybe we're that weird swimmer who's doing the butterfly swimming technique, you know. I don't know why I thought since childhood anybody who did the butterfly, you know, swimming technique, I would be like, who does this guy think he is, you know? I'm kidding. I know how to do it, you know, but the butterfly swimming technique. But what I'm trying to get to, dear viewers, is that we are beings. The understanding of our life at first may seem to be an analytical journey, but after you have reached a certain contentment with analysis, the individual has to wonder, okay, I have common sense, I have rationality, I have sequential logic, formal logic, and going along with this, why is it that in my moment of experience there is unknown variables and there is emotions? So it's not just that the brain has access to an observable universe where it can measure, calculate, create structures of meaning, or map out the unconscious consciously, but it's kind of like, you know, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because in my outer realms, I feel I'm in a world. In my inner realms, I feel I am a world. So believe it or not, like, it may appear I have a biological body. It may appear that I have an individual voice, a persona is speaking to you. But if I was to be truly honest, like, who is speaking to you right now is a presence, is an instantaneous presence of how attention and energy are codependently existing. I would say that to consider ourselves individuals in a macrocosmic event is a privileged arrogance. It's an ignorance. It's like, who knew ignorance would be helpful, right? I personally feel that our species has got it the other way around, you know? People think that we are inside a simulation and we have to escape to get to truth. I think it's the other way. I think truth, understood, eternity has no location. An eternal being is not a shaped creature. And my biggest fascination with intelligence, something which still, if somebody says, Mr. Within, do you opt into the idea of spirituality? I'll tell you, I opt in to the idea that there is mysterious, unknown events happening in nature, right? Mysterianism, there is a reason that school of thought and philosophy exists. And Mysterianism is how some things are happening that are unexplainable from our dimension. Imagine like a cube is, imagine we have okay, so let's take the idea, Carl Sagan shared this, I don't know where the idea originally comes from, but it's this idea of the flatlands. So the idea goes that there's this two-dimensional world where these squares are living. Imagine this place called Squareville. This two-dimensional world where squares are living, they're living in a society, everything is two-dimensional, okay? Now imagine in this two-dimensional Squareville, one of these squares thinks it's spiritual. And one of these squares in Squareville in Flatland is like, yo man, I'm not a square, I believe in the soul, I believe that consciousness surpasses this dimension. And imagine all the other squares come to the square in Squareville and they're like, buddy, we're just squares, what are you talking about? It's only squares, all we can see is squares, we have never been anything else other than squares. But the spiritual square is like, nah man, there's something else, I feel it, I am it, I'm being it, there's something else. And what ends up happening is that this square goes away from town like a shaman, goes alone into the forest, and suddenly realizes it has been a cube the whole time. What was two-dimensionally the limited beliefs of a square, and it was actually the unlimited, beyond belief experience of a cube. A three-dimensional entity. So what I am trying to convey to the viewers is that we are the effect of a dynamic higher dimensional process. Our individualism is how the mirage in the desert is noticing it's a mirage in the desert. This is why scientists nowadays, neurologists, notable neurologists, they come and say free will is an illusion. You think you're more than a biochemical engine limited to the laws of nature? Who says, It all takes us to the hard problem of consciousness. It takes us to that moment where we as individuals, as human beings on earth, wonder, okay, why is it that I can consciously move my skeletal structure? I could raise my hand in the air, but why is it that I can't, for example, relocate my organs in my body? Or why is it that I can't stop my heartbeat or stop breathing and all that? Why is it that certain functions of the experience of reality are involuntary, automated? And why is it that there's certain conscious functions, right? And so the most crucial thing, something they don't teach children, let me tell you the difference between, I think this is going to be incredible what I'm going to say, but let me explain to the world the difference between street smart people and street smart philosophers. It's street smart individuals and let's say, I don't know, naive, gentle souls. I don't naive, oblivious souls. Okay, the difference is that the street smart individual is wondering about what context will the moment end up in. But the naive, think of it this way, in Sufism and let's say mysticism, they had this, way with words where they would look at someone and they would say this person is a young soul. This other person is the old soul. Usually it's based on benevolence. So the more naturally benevolent the individual, the older the soul, because the soul has experienced the freaking violence. It's like when we talk about yoga, we're talking about the experience of samsara being a sort of transmigratory journey, right? So this is the thing that I think people who are non-spiritual are not comprehending about people who have a spiritual archetype. Through unknown experiences, they are authorizing new archetypes to go through. So what does that mean? That means, let's say we have person A, person B, and person C. Let's say person A goes throughout the lifetime experiencing 1,000 archetypes, okay? Let's say person B goes through the lifetime experiencing 500 archetypes, okay? And let's say person C goes through life experiencing like, I don't know, 10 archetypes. So what does that mean? That means, you see, we are this unknown attention looking out of our eyes through a first person modality. The biological existences are what grounds us to existence, to the world, but it is our psychological acceptance of our body that in some sense stabilizes. So what it is we're living in two worlds. And anybody who's been in this world and suffering and like you're having life is like not making sense to you, it's because you're not in the correct context. Okay? This was the biggest thing I realized about all my relationships that didn't work, you know? That I did not adjust to the flow of how the context of the experiences in the moment were changing. You know, the first sentence I wrote that I knew I was a writer was, I wrote this sentence, I remember I taped it to the wall. This was 2011, I think, 12, 11. I wrote, I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day. And then I realized that's the point of life. We are so busy suffering from our past that we don't realize the point of life is to experience the new. And what love is the access. Because anybody who dislikes where they are not, some part of their psyche is not giving them a permission to be themselves. You know, it's a hard feeling, but I think the purpose of life is to, in some sense, access an arsenal of perception, right? Just like we have a gladiator, right? Like in the movie Gladiator, the gladiators were in a room in the Colosseum, all sitting on benches, and then they would open the doors and they would all go outside and they would select their weapons and masks. I feel that the human experience is a sort of preliminary waiting zone. It's kind of like we're all preparing for the unknown. Okay? In certain ancient schools of thought, they had this view that the being was, like for them, it was easier to see eternity than temporal, the temporal nature. So they didn't see the idea of death as a sort of disentanglement into meaninglessness, into nothing. They saw that everything was this unified mind. So what death was to ancient, let's say, ancient cultures, okay? What death was to them was every day you're getting closer to the singularity with truth. So some people, they think they're dying. Some people are noticing that Earth is a tourist spot. It's like we're travelers in this dimension. Okay? Who was it? That South Park guy? Okay. You know, when I was really young, I remember, I have a twin brother, and I remember my mother coming to me and my brother and just telling us to be good people. I remember that as a kid. To be a good person. And I remember I was like, okay, you know, this sort of supreme command, you know. And I was like, okay, how do I be a good person in a world that isn't good? You know, little did I know, you know, my mother in that moment set me on the path of a deep ethical analysis of what does morality mean if we don't know what we are, right? To me, let me tell you what it is. It's like, imagine 8 billion extraterrestrials from, let's say, an advanced, okay, this is going to be sci-fi example, but I'm going to say it this way. Imagine 8 billion extraterrestrial beings, very advanced extraterrestrial beings. They were bored, and so these 8 billion extraterrestrial beings were like, all right, we're going to land on, we're going to imagine, here's the better way I could say it, is how Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller they talked about this planet as spaceship Earth. And so I want whoever you are to envision for a second 8 billion advanced multidimensional beings. They put on the uniform and they became 8 billion crew members of spaceship Earth. We're living at an incredible time where, for the sake of because it's been on such a delay, the true globalization of the species, not the economical globalization of the species, but the true global honor of our species. This world is incredible because from the moment we are born, karma is how the world is communicating to us. The old soul, the young soul, takes the world for face value, so gets lost in the beauty of its simulation. The old soul realizes that the planet is scared, and we are here to get rid of its fear. Because we know, even it's an evolutionary biological theory, that when it comes to even the part of the brain called the amygdala, fight or flight, responsibility, conscious responsibility and engagement, or unconscious efficiency. I wondered what kind of people these lectures of mine would attract. I remember when I was young, my grandpa told me, my grandpa was successful in business, and I remember I asked him, Grandpa, how do you succeed in business, right? And my grandpa just said, he was a very religious man, and he said, open a store and God will send you customers. And so that's very important, that we have to live like every person. It's like, what it is, all these Mr. Within talks are pointing to is how can we live? How can we create an individual lifestyle that is simultaneously a collective victory? And what I've realized? I've realized the only agent that is making the world civilized and gentle is man's engagement with the linguistic system. You see, it's not that the viciousness of our animal, like when we were in the forest, it's not like that wilderness went away. It's just that wilderness went into a domain of language. So human beings are such advanced creatures that before they are physically fighting, they are subjectively fighting. And if they can't subjectively complete the moment, they will objectively complete the moment. There's some moments that, an offense is a sort of self-defense. I don't know. There's different styles of fighting. For me, if there was a specific fighting style, it would have to do with speed. That's what I feel is going to happen. We're going to, the future generations are going to experience a way more fascinating and a faster psychological states of being, to the point that they may get bored of being biological bodies. But there's so much mystery to biology that in some sense, I don't know. So, potentials of the psyche. I love our species. Not because of what it has done, that's been pretty fucked up, but because of what it can do. If we do not honor the potential of life, we have denied the future its greatness. So whoever you are, 2023, anybody who listens to these Mr. Within talks, I am going to instruct this. Why not? I'll give a command to the audience. As from the simplicity of the heart of hearts, any person who has listened to these Mr. Within talks is a part of this channel, or this channel has been a part of their psyche. It is very important that for the next 2 years, 2023 and 2024, that you practice the archetype of benevolence and start paying attention to your karma. And not paying attention to karma doesn't mean analytical understanding. It means a selfless observation of how the moment is happening before you put an effort. So whoever you are listening, you have to be the kindest person in your moment. Absolute kindness, absolute benevolence. Any opportunity where you can help, you must help. Anything that out of nowhere, out of the blue happens, you must pay attention to and assist. And the idea is that we are selflessly building an advanced civilization, or we are selflessly being the most advanced self, because the reason I am telling the viewers to be kind and benevolent, because that is the most advanced archetype. When you reach mastery, you reach a state where you can do things that have never been done before. Okay? And you will realize acceptance, psychological acceptance, is the next part of the mastery. After physical perfection, there's a psychological stability, acceptance of ability that's required, you know? So what I'm trying to say is that if I was the most advanced being right now, there would be no need for me to reduce people. So an advanced power is an advancing power. And we want 8 billion advancing human beings until the advanced humanity collectively is recognized. And you know, who knows, you know, maybe there will be a Mr. Within day, you know. Who knows, maybe a podcaster may make it into the history books. I mean, of course, you know, Joe Rogan is the pioneer. I think Joe Rogan doesn't realize how historic of a figure he is. What it is we serve the civilization. Let's say you want to serve yourself. Let's say you're evil, egotistical, selfish. You're like, fuck everything else. I'm on a solo victory mission, right? If you have that attitude, you're going to realize you take the potential of life away from what the moment can be. It's like a religious kid being like, God, am I supposed to think, or are you supposed to move everything? Am I supposed to move myself, or are you supposed to move? And then we realize that the mind's potential is ultimately a collective potential. What I'm trying to say is we are psychologically universal beings, but we are physiologically human beings. And the human idea is like clothing. You know? I think this is when any person who's experienced anything in public, like on a public stage, they're going to realize it's the clothes the mind wore in that moment. And the inner realms move faster than the outer realms, and my task is to help this species discriminate between its inner realms and outer realms so it can listen to the living earth. Do you know? So this is the power of trust. This is why in religion people are like, wait a minute, I'm submitting my individual ego to a higher power. For what? To realize that that higher power is the movement. You know what it is? Religion is another way where instead of the complexity of an ego handling the moment, the trust in the space's ability is moving the moment. I will tell you, there has been years of my life and 100% days where I have been nothing. That means it's as if imagine being an entity that doesn't think about your own name, your sense of you, not physically I'm speaking. I'm speaking about like, it's as if I've been sight in space. And those moments are very profound because you realize the limits of your ability are the limits of your perception. And in 2023 and the coming years, that's what we're going to see. You know it has to happen before 2050, right? Before 100%, right? Before super intelligent computers arise, the natural entity must attempt super intelligence. That means right now, the information age, people don't have to like journey. The person doesn't have to skydive, they can skydive. A person doesn't have to write an essay, they just go on this AI website and they're like, write me an essay, right? So what we're noticing is that technology is replacing all the things we had to do that kept us human. So in order to strengthen the humanity, we must honor the human species and honor life force. This is something that when I was younger, like have you ever, I think everybody has moments where they look back at their past and they cringe at how they exist. Do you know? And when I look at my ignorance in youth, all my ignorance was because I had assumed too soon. So whoever you are, you know, we're not just known beings. We're not just a known self in a known world. We're simultaneously an unknown self in an unknown world. And, you know, I'll read it. Let me go to the World Health Organization. I don't know how they're getting these statistics, but I think it's worthy of reading. Depression is a common mental order. Globally, it is estimated that 5% of adults suffer from depression. It says depression is a common illness worldwide with an estimated 3.8% of the population affected, including 5% among adults and 5.7% among adults older than 60 years. Approximately 280 million people in the world have depression. Holy shit. So whoever you are who's depressed, you're not alone. 280 million people are also depressed like you. Can you imagine, you know, the world has reached such an inefficient point where we're like, you know, we shall find commonality, solidarity in our depression. You know, it's like, you know, the fact that we're depressed together reduces the depression. But guys, it is a serious issue. I mean, I'm laughing because for me, I have realized that worse than depression is that we're temporary beings in a world. And once you understand mortality, you kind of, life becomes an empty canvas where novelty becomes beauty, right? So I'm telling you, whoever you are, you may think, you know, King Arthur's brain lifted the sword from the stone, but it was King Arthur's heart. It like back in the day in legends, this is something they don't speak about, the King Arthur legend. Back in the day in ancient, let's say, magical culture, and Chinese mythology specifically, swords were not just swords, objects were vessels. And so each sword had a spirit. and poetically the spirit was like based on those who had wielded the sword. So if the sword had in some sense been a sword that was in the hand of master swordsmen, and somebody let go of the sword, like, and some naive person got the sword would be lost automatically, as if the sword had a mind of its own and the sword would decide its wielder, you know, or the conception would decide its pioneer. So 280 million people have depression. Depression is another way of saying your past has convinced you of who you are more than your future, simply because there's more content to the past than the future. And this is reasonable. Like, the past is past, we've seen the past, but we haven't seen our future. What we know about the future is, and what we know about the evolutionary opportunity, is that we have 100 years, and every day is a sequence of behavior. So, 100 years into so 100 years of life, okay? 100 years of life is 36,525 days, okay? And each day is sequences of actions, okay? So this is really what's happening. We're having 8 billion. This isn't on mute, is it? So to continue, let's say the human being is an organism that has 36,525 days, and in those days it can make a decision, right? And it can act upon those decisions, and it's sequential. And the human biological system, this is something that's bizarre, like it's another proof that we are like an interdimension, there's some interdimensional quality to our intelligence, because we have a tendency to repeat desire even though it's outside of natural rhythm. So really, human consciousness is an intelligence that is capable of discriminating between how it's being human and how the world is being the world. Right now, most people walk in the world and they think the planet isn't alive. But imagine one day we hear a voice from the clouds. We hear this giant voice. Imagine from every tree acts as a speaker. Right, imagine the leaves of trees act as speakers, and we hear this broadcasted voice being like, "Hey, human species," and everybody on the planet's freaking out. Presidents are freaking out, and they're like, "What's this voice? You know, who's this voice?" And imagine the leaders of the nations are like, "Yo, voice, who are you? What are you? Are you an alien?" And the voice says, "No, I'm the voice of the planet, guys. I've been here this whole time." And then we realize, no way, the planet had a personality. Can you imagine somebody who speaks to the soul of the planet and people are like, "Yo, how was it?" And the person's like, "Yo, man, the planet's super chill." The planet appreciates before it understands, so it ends up understanding everything. That's the power of nature. Whoever you are, you may think you're nothing, which is the source of depression. Because depression is when we can't properly contextualize the concept of ourself. And you know why? Let me tell you why there's 280 million people with depression. Because these 280 million people, and I've experienced depression, I don't treat it like, when I think of my ancestors, depression is meaningless. But like how they survive compared to how we are surviving now. But when I think about it, it's really decision making. So 280 million people have an issue with making a decision about their future self. And because you can't decide your future self, yourself is way more prone to being fragmented, right? This is something they don't tell, like a lot of people who, let's say, like I sometimes wonder, right? They call it art therapy. And pretty much think of like the psychologist being like, all right, this person in front of me doesn't have a stable mind. How can I help this person? Let's have this person try to create something, try to build something. Because we know that the human being has three avenues of expression. It can create, it can maintain, it can destroy. These are the archetypes of Brahman, Shiva, Vishnu, and sometimes why God, like statues of gods back in the day, had three faces. It was a suggestion that the god was present in three dimensions at once. For example, you see these gods that have multiple hands in let's say polytheist, let's say in Vedic, in Hindu culture, right? These gods, their hands meant their abilities in different dimensions. So it was like somebody could create let's say a Shiva-looking statue for, I don't know, Michelangelo or Da Vinci, where in one hand the guy has a brush, has a ruler, has a protractor, has all this. Do you see what I'm saying? It was the dimensions of ability, or the dimensions where the ability was there. It all comes down to permission. If we are judged heavily in this life, and if you're a shy person, you are wondering how to, it's like you want the world to give you your context. And the world is a machine, so it doesn't have sentience. I shouldn't, what am I saying? Not the world, society, civilization, the prototype of civilization 1.0 we have right now, it's like a paper shredder. Like it's not conscious of what it's shredding, right? It's like a mechanism, right? What laws are like the subjective gears to societal behavior, right? And the understanding of those laws suggests the quality of the behavior of the individuals, right? And really it's about what questions we want our life force to be an answer to. For me, I'm like, we're living at a time where everybody says they have a mind, but we don't know what the mind is. Like, consciousness is still a mystery. So what do? Should people just, just hide under the wing of the scientific method? Or should we realize that the purpose of multiple variables in life is very similar to this poetic idea? They would say that life is the garden of existence, which is another way of saying all these ideological systems, secular ideological systems, religious ideological systems, it's pretty much everybody, it's like a bunch of different flowers in a garden, and one of the flowers is like everybody, all the flowers have to be sunflowers, right? Or imagine a rose becomes a dictator and it says only all flowers have to be roses, right? The purpose is that we're here to be a human being that has never existed before. There's nothing to be depressed about because we don't know what we can do in the future. So depression converts into this unknown observer of the unknown future. Spirituality doesn't mean like ultimate knowledge, I would say. It's like, even if you get it's like if you think truth is a noun, you're going to realize it's a verb. If you think truth is a verb, you're going to suddenly think it's a noun. And then at some point, you're going to realize it's multiple dimensions present at the same time. In other words, we're not squares in Squareville, we are cubes that have access to Squareville, which is another way of saying, like, why am I not super, like, fascinated by the idea of past lives, right? Why? Because it's the past life to the tip of the iceberg. That means if right now this biological existence and psychological existence of mine is, let's say, like 17% of my actual being, and imagine my actual being, like imagine somebody in their past life were like the Andromeda galaxy, people would be like, were you in the Andromeda galaxy? The person's like, no man, I was a galaxy. I was the space where endless manifestations realized they were manifest, which is another way of saying the evolution of creaturehood is into becoming a mirror, a universal mirror. It's like you realize, no way, just like the phone, there's airplane mode, there's different modes to a device, there's different modes of mind to being a human being. And if you haven't accepted a context, you're going to be nervous and you're going to suffer. But once you accept a context, you become confident. Why? Because the moment can't change. Who was it? I think it was Sadhguru. This guy who's like, my life changed when I stopped arguing with people, And I was like, wow, how is this guy like not arguing with people? And he's like, he just agrees. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing ever, you know? Agreement, you see, the purpose of life is display of skill. That means what I hope is going to happen in the future, that the most attractive archetype in civilization is going to be competence. Who knows though? Who knows how the world's gonna move? You know, guys, maybe it's a good time for me to share what I think may happen in the future, just from my eyes. You know, recently there's this business opportunity, and I think in about 2 months I'm moving to Dubai. I realized something, you know, I was doing research and I realized Dubai they've made this commitment that by the year 2071 they want to be the most advanced nation. So I don't know, but I feel like life is taking me to, like I've been talking about advancement to such a degree where life is taking me to see it, you know. You know, something I personally think about my own karma is that it's pretty much every day of being alive is like we're getting a chance to open the gift of what our mind can do. The new year is coming in a couple hours. In 6 hours, 33 minutes. Honor yourself, but honor yourself through not the greatness of your mind, but the greatness of the world. It's very simple after some point. The species, the advanced civilization is the greatest argument. To the end of time, anybody can challenge me. I will say that we will realize it. People are going to realize what Mr. Within is pointing to. The idea of the advanced civilization is the greatest idea in the observable universe. One of the greatest external ideas. When it comes to internal ideas, the concept of truth is one of the most incredible internal ideas. For me, is how can I get 8 billion advanced communicators to realize their advanced potential so they can build an advanced civilization and usher in an era of great honor. You see, humor is fine. For me, I watch a lot of stand-up comedy, and stand-up comedy is all about context shifting. You know, the person just goes on stage and just, you know, surprises the audience with a different context. But for me, it's this emotion that we haven't experienced, but for some reason in my inner realms, it's very familiar to me, right? It's when, think of it this way, the human species has a type of mindset that anything it's close to, it believes quickly. So if the species is close to an inefficient outcome, it's going to get more convinced it's inefficient. If it gets close to an advanced outcome, it's going to feel advanced. As human beings realize we have one lifetime to see how advanced we can be. Like, this is my fascination. The only thing that is, you know, sometimes when I am, you know, intentionally, like I sabotage myself into loneliness. In those moments, at least I understand that the task of consciousness is to engage the ability of the moment. You know, it's like to be an eternal being is to be a non-existential moment. And those moments are very pure, but they are dehumanized. And the species is getting to a future where it's going to realize how much technology is dehumanizing it. I do have this theory that the future generations are maturing quicker and quicker, which is going to be weird because it's going to be a time where children, it's like, what is being a rug that's being pulled from underneath our feet is the naturalness of childhood. The information age is allowing children to psychologically leap to conclude before experiencing, which means generations of scared followers. So the reality has to be that in order to build an advanced civilization, we have to be advanced from the beginning. So when the new year happens, when the bell rings, guys, and 2023 arrives, it is time to consider yourself as the most advanced state of being, not claiming egoically, but to realize that we are the most advanced conscious creaturehood in this universal sector. It is our responsibility to use our knowledge of what is beyond us to advance us. So when the new year hits, welcome to the advanced humanity. Thanks for listening. Much blessings and namaste. And I don't know, I'm trying to think what I could say about these talks. I'm trying to schedule posts for the members. So I'm trying to, I got to sit down and schedule 365 daily posts for members. But, there's another life I'm living that the viewers in cyberspace don't know. And, I've reached that point where I think it's just my mortality. It's like a moment comes in life where mortality becomes a guardian angel or a guiding spirit, and it points you to what you can do before you're no longer here, right? The poet Rumi, I get emotional when I think about this poem, but he has this passage, this poem, poetry, where he says, before death takes away all that is given, give away all there is to give. What I'm realizing is human beings are accumulating value, holding it for the day, waking up the next day and being a completely new human being, or trying to be. So what this means is that there's a huge resource mismanagement, and there's huge markets for human beings to find ways that we can recycle value. So that era is approaching. And some people say New Year's resolutions and visions. I've reached this point where I remember it was kind of like a prayer meditation at the same time, where I was like, universe, truth, you have opened my eyes, you have brought me here. If you have brought me here to serve the advanced civilization, show me the most advanced. So I will say this, those people who have been drawn to these Mr.Within talks, you have been drawn to the aura of a conscious attention that is wondering about the most advanced, and it's instantaneous, dear viewers. The most advanced state of being is to instantaneously be the most advanced state of being. 2023, live an incredible individual life and also live an incredible collective life. Serve your civilization. For example, I'm familiar with the religion of Islam, and in Islam, one of the pillars of the faith is charity. So to give 10% of everything, to back to the society. And for me, what I want people to give back to the society is not just money. I want you as a human being to realize that nobody has your eyes, and you are in the communicating era of human history. And so serve. It's like we have a lifetime to experience advancing a civilization. It's so cool, right? And we're living at a time where the individual ego is out of control, like in an era where people are trying to be god kings artificially. We have to be servants of poetically the truth that is the greatness of the world. You see, call it God. For me, I something fascinating in certain religions. One of the names of God is literally the word greatness, the great or something, right? So to me, greatness. If you're religious, get to see, God, the greatness of God's creation. If you're secular, get to see how advanced this evolutionary opportunity is, and you're going to see that the skies are, the next great canvas for human real estate. There will come a time where we will look from the sky, where children will be born in sky cities. It's very cool when right now I'm trying to wonder about the future, and all I get is feeling. I get a feeling. When I think about my past, there's imagery, content in a realm. But when I wonder about like the next 10 years, it's just this feeling of, will the species activate a decency that it will notice what is truly valuable here? I am not telling people to think they are an advanced ego. See, I am saying an advanced being is a being that is advancing in all dimensions, right? That is considering the advancement of all dimensions. So an advanced civilization would be a civilization that's considering considering advancement in all dimensions of civilization. An advanced human being is a human being that is considering advancement in all dimensions of human perception. And so the whole point of this Mr.Within podcast is because there is a lantern, there's a torch about the ancient wisdom that must not be forgotten. It's another way of saying mystical observations. It's the archaic revival. What was psychological spirituality is turning into cyberspace spirituality. Just like how, let's say, we could say it's kind of like a micro spiritual experience, a person creating a social media profile. It's like they can control being something which they are not from the beginning. And to be a human being, it's like customizable. It's like consciousness customizes experientially existential value. It's going to be an incredible year. And I will say this to the viewers, we're all here once in the forms that we are. And the greatness of our species awaits. We've experienced individual failure, individual success. The species have experienced this. We have experienced collective inefficiency, but the collective efficiency awaits. The advanced civilization is the legendary mythos of the future generations. Cultural ethos, the contextual inspiration of the future would be how their greatness is their birthright, not their short inability. For how long are we going to, have the species have an inferiority complex? The superiority complex of the species can only, it's like the most superior state of the species is when it learns to love itself. And how can a species love itself when a species is the definition of a collective being made of 8 individual active points? So what I'm saying is, if you treat the world as an advanced world, you're giving it an instantaneous permission to be advanced. So from the era where human beings thought they were unlucky or lucky to the era of advanced efficiency. It's all good and evil is going to be replaced with efficiency and inefficiency based on as many levels and angles of perception to the moment we can configure. And so, as a timeless, unknown witness of the moment, Happy New Year and the space-time continuum. Rise, mankind, rise.